I don't know if anyone else has discussed this yet. I haven't seen it discussed, but I think it's important that people know that this is going on. So shout out to Case Study QB here for this clip. Case is always doing the damn thing. What you're going to see in this clip, and then I'm going to go into an article and show you another clip afterwards. You are going to see people being arrested in Florida because of past votes. Now, these are people who have criminal record. They did their time. And to their knowledge, they didn't break any rules. They didn't break any laws. So how could something like this have happened? We're going to get into that. Let's go ahead and dive in to this clip here.
And they show that even the police making these arrests, even the police were confounded by the entire situation.
Apparently, I guess you have a warrant?
For what?
I'm not sure.
For voter stuff, man.
Oh
my God, man. What? Yes, sir. So unfortunately, right now, we're going to have to take you to jail.
Why
is y'all doing this now and this happened years ago?
I don't know.
So let me pause it here. Notice that he said, why are you doing this now? And this happened years ago. So this gentleman here voted years ago, and he's now being arrested for it. It goes on.
I have no idea, man.
This shit crazy, man. Y'all put me in jail for something I didn't know nothing about. Why would y'all let me vote if I wasn't able to vote?
I'm not sure, buddy. I don't know.
So that's a valid question. If he was not legally allowed to vote at that time, why did they let him vote? You can also hear the confusion in the police officer's voice. They don't even really know why this is happening either. They just know that they have these warrants and they have to go serve these warrants and they have to arrest these individuals. They don't know the details behind it. They're just basically, I guess they're saying they're there just to do their job. But this is really strange. And it is happening in Florida. So if you live in Florida or you know someone that lives there, you need to pay attention to this, because I feel like this should have already been grandfathered in. I don't think you should be able to go back and now arrest people for voting years ago, but they continue to do it.
So, ma'am, we have a warrant for your arrest.
For what?
For voter fraud.
I'm like, voter fraud? I voted, but I ain't commit no fraud.
Well, so that's the thing. I don't know exactly what happened with it, but you do have a warrant. That's what it's for. Okay.
Oh, my God.
This is a priority for the DeSantis administration, which voting rights advocates say is creating a chilling effect across the state.
Okay, so I do want to explain here. I want to give a little bit more detail, because if you just watch that clip, that doesn't really go into the specifics as to why this happened in the first place. Now, before I get into this article, I do want to explain to you that Florida is a ballot initiative state, like my state, Massachusetts. Now, there are pros and cons that come along with BIs. In some states, depending on where you live, the governor can actually come in and overrule a ballot initiative and either revert it back to what the original law was or change it to something else. They can do that depending on the rules in your state. Apparently, in Florida, Governor DeSantis can do that. Now, here's my problem. When it comes to, incidents and events that have happened, like I said, it should have been grandfathered in, that happened before the law was changed. Those people should have already been grandfathered in. That's how I look at it. But some of you may be wondering, how did it get to this situation to begin with? Let's dive in. In Florida, the right to vote can cost you. And they are 100% right about that. Now, this article is written by Gabriela Sanchez. Despite a state constitutional amendment restoring voting rights to most people with past convictions, Florida has done all it can to keep them from the polls. So this was one of those opportunities that they had before, and I'll go into it as well in the article. where they had a ballot initiative that would actually make it legal for people that had prior convictions. And I believe there's a limit to this, but prior convictions to be able to vote. Now that they're out of prison, they did their time and they can go ahead and vote just like you and I could, right? But like I said, with ballot initiatives, there are pros and cons. And if you live in a state where the governor can overturn it, that can also happen. Let's see how this transpired, because I think that this should be a warning sign to people. Now, 55-year-old Kevin Bolton was arrested at a homeless shelter earlier this year in Gainesville, Florida. He was held on a $30,000 bond and charged with 3 counts of third-degree perjury and fraud. His alleged crime: voting with unpaid fines and court fees. So, do you see the expense that this is costing people? $30,000 bond, 3 counts of third-degree perjury and fraud. So now you have people who have already served their time, who are probably, just trying to make their way back into their community and back into society. Now that they are faced with another possible, I don't know what I'm going to call it, stain, another possible stain on their record because of voting. So they're saying that these people committed voter fraud. But at the time, they didn't know they were doing that because the law has changed. Now, let's go into what the ballot initiative said, because this is the part where I think this needs to be explained. So we're going to start with in 2018. Let me break this down for you. In 2018, Floridians approved the Voting Restoration Amendment, known as Amendment 4, which aimed to restore voting rights to most state residents with past felony convictions who have completed their sentences. So as you guys know, depending on what state you live in, some states, like if you have a past felony conviction, you still can't vote. Florida was one of those states. So the people implemented this change to the amendment to make it so that those people with those past felony convictions can now vote after they have served their time. So they've already served their time. That was in 2018. Now let's go on. Amendment 4 put an end to Florida's categorical policy of lifetime disenfranchisement for felony conviction, a policy with clear fascist origins that was estimated to disenfranchise 1 in 4 Black men in the state. Supporters celebrated the amendment, which was estimated to expand the franchise to roughly 1.4 million Floridians. However, not even a year later, Florida's Republican-controlled legislature passed Senate Bill 7066, which bars people from regaining their voting rights if they have outstanding court debts related to a felony conviction. That was the case with Bolton. So essentially what you have here is you have people being punished for being poor. Because one of the things that I've brought up before about bail reform that is definitely needed in this country, some of the people that are sitting in jail aren't necessarily sitting there because they committed a crime. Some of the people sitting in jail are sitting there because they can't afford cash bail. So it's a system that punishes those who are poor, people who are in poverty. And now you have a similar situation where even when it comes to the voting rights, even though the people passed that amendment, they came in, they overturned it. The Florida Senate did, the Florida legislature did. And so now people who have past felony convictions, if they don't have the money to pay past court debts, which A lot of them probably don't, especially if you just got out of jail and you're looking for a job and you're limited with what kind of jobs you can get. You're probably not making a lot of money. Those people are now being punished because they don't have the money to pay for the court debts that they had if they voted before. See, this is the catch. So let's go on. Any law that requires people to pay to vote is fundamentally anti-democratic. But to make matters worse, I can't talk tonight, I'm sorry. To make matters worse, Florida makes it virtually impossible for people with past convictions to determine with certainty what they might owe. This is done on purpose, by the way. This is another way to keep broke people broke and to keep people in debt. When it says here that it's impossible for them to even be able to tell what they might owe, that is something that is done on purpose. There's a record of it somewhere, but they don't want to give the record to them. This is another way to send these people right back to jail, as if the prison systems in this country is not already overcrowded. You want to send people to jail because they voted. Let's go on. The state lacks a centralized database for tracking court debt and payments. So if the state lacks a central database for tracking court debt and payments, then how do they know who owes what? Why hasn't something like that been fixed? This doesn't make any sense to me. Again, this is on purpose, guys. So there is no easy way to verify court debts within the state's 67 counties or access data on federal or out-of-state financial obligations. Well, I guess I better not get any tickets in Florida. So they don't even know if their information that they have is correct. As such, many formerly incarcerated people don't know they have outstanding debts at all, nor are they aware these debts would render them ineligible to vote. And without a proper record-keeping system, state and local officials struggle to help individuals verify this information. So if you don't know if you owe any court debt, and if you don't know how much you know, how is this a fair system to arrest people under this law? Exactly, Stephen. Then how do they know who to arrest? That's what I'm saying. You don't have a centralized database, but you know who to go lock up. Somebody has a record somewhere. Moreover, those who do know the exact sum of their debt are sometimes no better off. See, this is where it gets worse. Political scientist Daniel Smith estimated in 2020 that 79% of Floridians with past convictions who have completed their sentences owed at least $500 in fines and fees. The challenge of paying off these sizable debts can be insurmountable, especially when considering that involvement in the criminal legal system tends to mean lower income. $500 may not mean much to some people, but to a lot of people, $500 is a lot of money. And if you just got out of prison and let's say you're working a minimum wage job, let's say you're working at the Waffle House. And I point to that example because the Waffle House is notoriously known for employing people that have, past convictions. So if you're working somewhere like the Waffle House as a cook, how are you going to come up with that $500? And you got to pay your rent. Oh, and by the way, you don't even know if you owe it. There's that too, because their database is messed up. This is another way to keep people in the system, in the for-profit prison system. The people being arrested didn't even know what they were being arrested for. The police officers arresting them didn't even know why they were arresting them. So here you have people who voted not realizing that if they owed court debt that they weren't supposed to vote. So then that goes to the voting system, right? Because how is it that I think they have machines in Florida. How is it that the machines or paper ballots, whatever they were using down there, how is it that the system, that doesn't kick in as a red flag when they went to vote? This is all by design. I don't buy it one bit. This is a way, again, to keep people in the system. Now, it goes on to say, of the top challenge of verifying and meeting the financial prerequisites, Floridians are also being failed by the Department of the State, an office tasked with reviewing new registrations and flagging ineligible voters for removal from the rolls. Now, this article goes on. Eric, you can put that link to the article in the chat if people want to read the entire article. But there's also this video about it as well. Shout out to Case Study QB, where they go into even more detail. So it says, full discussion, Ron DeSantis and GOP subvert ballot initiative to amend Florida Constitution to allow felons to vote by passing a law that allows them only to vote if they paid their court fine and fees. Now arresting people who didn't know they couldn't vote. I don't even understand how this is legal. I really don't. And those two people they just arrested, how are they going to get out of jail now? Do they have $30,000 of bail money to get out? And even if they do, if they have a bail bondsman, someone that gets them out, they got to pay that $30,000 back. They're keeping you in debt, a slave to the system. Listen to this.
In 2018, Florida citizens easily passed a constitutional amendment to restore voting rights to convicted felons who had finished serving their sentences, accepting only those convicted of murder or felony sex offense. In 2018, that amendment was popular. It passed with nearly 65% of the vote.
So it passed with nearly 65% of the vote. The majority of the voters wanted this in place. So here you have the state legislator that came in, overrode it, and basically decided to go against what the voters actually wanted. So how do we have a democracy when the people, the figureheads who are sitting in the state houses, who are sitting in the White House, who are sitting in Congress, how do we have a democracy when they can just come in and override what the voters actually voted for?
And it applied to nearly 1.5 million Floridians. That constitutional amendment was a game changer, especially for Black Florida voters. That's because before the ballot initiative passed, more than 1 in 5 potential Black voters were barred from voting. That all changed with that landmark constitutional amendment in 2018, at least until Republicans got their hands on it. In 2019, the Republican-controlled legislature under Governor Ron DeSantis passed a law that allowed convicted felons to be eligible to vote only if they had repaid their court fines and fees, a sort of pay-for-play, if you will. The confusion over that change to the amendment, plus the fact that it was not made clear to convicted felons that if they were convicted of murder or a felony sex offense, then they could not vote, all of that has made it sort of a mess down in the state of Florida.
This is problematic because now it gets into the part where they're basically having to pay to vote. What happens if someone takes this to new extremes? What happens if someone takes this to extremes and say, all right, everybody, if you have student loan debt, you got to pay off that before you can vote? I mean, that's really extreme, but what if that happened? What if somebody came in and said, if you have medical debt, you have to pay that off before you can vote? What if they came in and said, if you have any type of debt at all, you have to pay it off before you can vote?
And it's against that backdrop that 2 months ago, Governor DeSantis held a big press conference to announce his crackdown on voter fraud in Florida, a crackdown that targeted a select group of voters. DeSantis declared that his newly created election police force had made a whopping 20 arrests. And those 20 arrests included people who were ineligible to vote. They were convicted of murder or a felony sex offense. The charge in those arrests is a third-degree felony. That kind of voter fraud calls for a sentence of up to 5 years in prison and up to $5,000 in fines. But the people targeted in this crackdown really seem to have had no idea that what they were doing, which was casting a vote, they had no idea that it was illegal, or at least that's what it appears to be in the videotape that we're about to show you. An honest mistake that is somehow grounds for them to be cuffed and taken to jail. NBC News has obtained police body cam footage from those arrests. They were first published by the Tampa Bay Times. And they show that even the police making these arrests, even the police were confounded by the.
So we saw that piece. So let me jump forward a little bit.
I'm not sure, buddy. I don't know.
So, man, we have a warrant for your arrest.
For what?
For voter fraud.
I'm like, voter fraud. I voted, but I ain't commit no fraud.
Well, so that's the thing. I don't know exactly what happened with it, but you do have a warrant. That's what it's for. Okay.
Oh, my God.
This is a priority for the DeSantis administration, which voting rights advocates say is creating a chilling effect across the state. Joining us now is Jasmine Burney Clark. She is the founder of the voting rights organization Equal Ground, one that works to build Black political power in the state of Florida. Ms. Burney Clark, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So can you tell me what kind of effect this decision to pursue voting fraud on the part of Governor DeSantis, what kind of effect has that had on the community of Floridians who are newly enfranchised with the right to vote?
Certainly, this governor and his appointed election officials have moved the goalpost on voting every year since he has been elected. The creation of his multi-million-dollar election task force has police departments doing his bidding, which essentially detaches this governor from his reelection bid that he would benefit from these arrests. And it also absolves him from doing his actual job. So it should actually be that he's expanding voting access, but instead he's identifying statewide ways to apprehend individuals when there should be a statewide agency that connects individuals to understanding what their fees and fines are so that they can vote and they can register confidently and not in fear. This governor.
So I just want to jump in and say something here. You know, why do they have to be arrested, though? Why do the cops have to come and arrest them? And she's right in the sense that someone should be notifying them when they are released, what their fines and what their fees are. And someone should notify them about the law. Oh, by the way, this, and this. You know what I mean? But they don't have a system in place to do that because, again, like I said, this is done on purpose. Let's go back in.
Has stoked fear and has removed the confidence and created more confusion. Those are the impacts we're seeing on the ground in this state since those arrests started to take place under his task force.
When you talk about that loss of confidence and the creation of confusion, I mean, what can be done to counter this? Because it is effectively terrifying to people who may not be sure if they can vote, right? And just stay home come November. I mean, is there any kind of grassroots effort to help people that actually can vote and get them to the polls?
You know, we are 3 weeks away from an election here in Florida and across the nation. And we are also in a state where we have been grossly underfunded and supported to help voters get out the vote, particularly organizations like mine and others across the state. But there are limited resources that have been made available through organizations like the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, where bail funds have been created and legal assistance has been provided. We don't know how far those funds will take people, but they are an initial start, given the fact that there is just limited resources and limited capacity in this state to help support those. Quite frankly, this is probably one of the most inhumane acts we have seen or witnessed in this state under this administration.
Which is saying a lot and is also of a piece with Governor DeSantis, who often launches major policy prescriptions, if you will, with no clear implementation strategy. And that policy tends to be quite controversial. Jasmine Burney Clark, founder of Equal Ground, thank you so much for your time and your efforts.
Thank you.
So here's my take on this. This could be a grassroots effort. Don't get me wrong. You know, MSNBC is doing this because they want people to come out and vote for who, right? They want you to come out and vote Democrat. They have their own bias that they're dealing with, right? But what I will add is this could be an example where like a grassroots organization can come in and fill in where the state is not. They could come in and fill in that gap and say, okay, you know, you were released from prison. This is what you owe in court fines and fees. Let me explain how this voting law works for you now. But here's the thing, like they just told you in that article, if there is no central database that has that information, then how are they going to get the information that will tell them who owes what and how much? And that's why I said this is done on purpose. Look, those of you who work in IT, or those of you who are like software, like gurus, and you're really into like computer programming or whatever, I'm pretty sure someone can come up with an app or a database that is centralized that can connect all of that information. So that way, these people, when they are released from prison, they can have that information. The problem is the state doesn't want to do that. Let's just be real. The state wants to put those people right back in prison where they came from. That's the problem. But if you are one of those people that know how to do that, you can make an app or whatever. It would be good if there was like a group or organization that could go to the State Department there in Florida and say, look, we're going to take on this responsibility. We've created this app. We've created this database that'll connect all the information so you don't have this, because this is a waste of resources. You're having police officers go out and arrest people for voting. Shouldn't those police officers be out trying to solve crime, like serious crime? So that's a waste of resources. To have people do this is absolutely ridiculous. And I sincerely hope, you know, if you know someone that lives in Florida, please send this to them, because I sincerely hope that Floridians will not take this lying down. I hope that people will push back on this, because this is not okay. Now, whether you agree with, and here some people may come in and say, well, if they didn't do any crime, they wouldn't have been in jail in the first place, and then they wouldn't be in this situation. Yeah, tomato, tomato. But the point is, the people did their time and they are free, and they should be able to vote. When the law changed, people should have been notified, and they should have been notified regardless if they had court fines that they needed to pay. Now, here's another part of the problem. A lot of times when people are released from prison, they don't have a permanent address, right? Some of them may stay at a halfway house. They may stay with a family member for a couple of months so they can get on their feet. So there needs to be a way to connect with them regardless. This is terrible. Like, should not happen. Should not. I'm gonna go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Andrew. It's worth mentioning that even if you go home with charges dropped, etc., the act of being arrested and handcuffed is humiliating, painful, and scary. Messed. Yeah, all over again. And then the neighbors, if there's neighbors outside, and guys, I used to live down south, people are nosy. And the neighbors outside looking at you, just sitting on the porch like, oh, there they go again, going back to jail, thinking it's something serious, and it's not. Rick says in Texas, they have state attorney general officers knock on doors to verify that it was you. And that happened to my then 70-year-old aunt. Isn't this crazy? JB says they overturned the will of the people. That's totalitarian. Yeah, that is a part of BI. So if you guys get a chance, there's a ballot initiative panel that I did a while back. It's on my channel. When you get a chance, watch that panel where it was like all of us that live in BI states, like CJ's on there, Ron Paclone's on there. I think wasn't one of the guys from Vanguard was on there, but like we all talked about how ballot initiatives work, and we talked about which states are BI states, and we talked about the pros and the cons. So definitely check out that panel. Robert says punishing people after punishing people is inhumane. Pat, those police officers should be out arresting pharma execs and their bribed politicians. The police are supposed to work for us. Raziel the Great, I live down here. Most people have no clue this is going on. I didn't know about it until this morning. So definitely share this, guys. They're just going to keep arresting more people. So if you have a loved one or a friend that you know that has been in the system and they've been released recently, please let them know about this.